Hi, how you doing, Harold?
Hi, good to see you, Bill. It's good to see you again. Um, I've known Bill for many years, and so we've had really some interesting times together. Um, I've asked him to come speak with us on this virtually. He's presented several times at the Yosemite Conservation Heritage Center, which you see here in person in Yosemite Valley. But of course, this year the building is closed down because of COVID-19. But Bill performed several times at the building and campfire programs afterwards, and he's used to doing these kinds of programs. And his program tonight is going to be kind of in his persona as Mr. Habitat, which is his nickname. Bill's written a number of songs that have to do with some of our conservation heritage that I think you'll really enjoy.
Okay.
Um, so let's see. This was a picture I took of Bill back in probably around 1992 or so when he came to Visalia and did a concert for the kids at one of the schools here. That's one of the things that he's often done, traveled all over the United States and performing for schools and other places. And so the kids loved Bill's performances and fondly called it Mr. Habitat. So we really had a great time with that. So um, we're going to have a short playlist tonight of some of his iconic songs. When I showed this to Bill, I was saying, this was kind of some of my favorite songs I'd like you to play, and him being a musician said, well, these aren't the way I would normally do a concert. Well, this is a geek out, environmentalist way of presenting a playlist because a little bit of a historical thing here. So it's a little bit of a chronological order in a certain amount of extent. With bringing in the past and the current issues in the future. So it's going to be a little unusual in that respect, but it'll be a walk down memory lane. It'll be some very interesting kinds of programs. So before we begin with the first song, Bill, did you want to say anything?
Usually.
You want to say something
Sure.
just to introduce yourself
Sure.
beyond what I've
Yeah.
done so far?
Hi, Virginia. Hi, Nancy. Hi, Ron. Good. Are you there? I hope.
I see him there.
Oh, cool. We got folks in Austin, folks in California, Canada, maybe. Well, Harold, this is quite an honor to be able to do these songs in this setting because it was a a getting those events in Yosemite and the national parks. We played Lassen 17 years in a row, but we'd start Glenn Waldeck and I, sometimes some others, and I went solo for several years. We planned a whole trip around a $75 gig, and because it was so special, unique, and the venues were so wonderful, parks and the lodge like. So I'm glad to have heard from Bonnie today, Bonnie Geisel. This song is, Muir's favorite dinner story. They say, "Oh, tell that story again, tell that story again," and it's when he has a tremendous interaction with this dog that the dog was a little aloof for a while, and Muir wasn't quite sure uh, how that was going to work out, but it did as it goes. Would you like to run through your pictures there? Look at that. That's the book.
Well, this is the children's edition based on the book by John Muir. John Muir's story is still widely popular. I noticed one of the foremost children's storytellers in America just published a new version of that, telling the same story in John Muir's voice. So it's been a very popular story. It was probably the most popular story he ever told when he was living. There was lots of stories about he would be telling the story, and all the people who weren't supposed to be there would be creeping up to the doorways to hear the story, and that's the way he got
Hmm.
his kids to come to dinner on time. So we'll hear next segment tomorrow, and they get there on time to hear the next story. But this was a really iconic, as we'll hear from Bill's story. This was a really life-changing event for John Muir because he not only met the native Alaskan Indians and found so much to admire in them, he also met this little dog, and he'd known farm animals and dogs and animals throughout his life, but he really connected with this dog Stikine and realized that we are all kin, and that's the message of this song. So let's hear Bill go ahead with that. Me and Stikine.
Right. I did try to uh, paraphrase Muir as often as I could here and keep it edited down to that. So this is where it's almost a co-write. One morning while rising in the driving rain, nature was calling to me once again. Out on the glacier, adventure was waiting, and I had to be out exploring again. There was no time for breakfast, there was no time for tea. I reached for my coat and some bread crust to eat, and outside the tent, in the wind and the sleet, a canine companion appeared at my feet. It was little Stikine, the Reverend's best friend, a little mixed breed, black, white, and tan, named for Alaska Stikine Indians. He'd proven his courage again and again. Go back, said I, this is no hike for you. I don't know what waits in the glacier's deep blue, but he was looking ahead, so brave and so keen, that I shared my breakfast of bread with Stikine. We hiked through the storm till the glacier appeared. 'Twas one I'd first seen in a previous year. And this frozen river I wanted to map. We had one day to cross and return to the camp. The glacier grew deeper, the crevasses grew wide. Me and Stikine took 'em all in our stride. Was adventure as grand as I'd ever seen on a grand crystal prairie, me and Stikine. Our task was successful, but on the way back, we found we were trapped by a mighty crevasse. The one lone escape was a sliver of ice. It dipped like a thread, sharp as a knife. For the very first time in all our wild days, I heard from Stikine a sound of dismay. He looked at the glacier, he looked at the sliver. He looked at me like I was out of my mind. Hush your fears, my boy, said I. We'll get safe across, though it's not safe to try. We must risk our lives to save them sometimes. No right way is easy in this world of ice. I straddled the sliver and started across, leveled it off for Stikine's little paws. As I inched through the air, he cried in despair, for he knew he was next in this bone-chilling dare. At last I was over, but I'll never know how I gained the far side, how I cut the last hold. 'Twas something inside greater than I looked back and said, Stickeen, you must try. He silenced himself and measured each step. The world was that ledge, one slip would be death. As he walked on the edge, I held my breath till he sprang up beside like a spirit possessed. Then came a scene I will never forget. Little Stickeen was no longer a pet. He was weeping and sobbing and crying with joy, and I cried there with him, this brave little boy. I've traveled Alaska and the American West, seen Mother Nature at her wildest and best. I've learned, gained respect for our animal kin. In our souls we are not all that different from them. And little Stickeen, my wilderness friend, so many times I think back to him and the wildest of days I've ever seen. On a grand crystal prairie, me and Stickeen.
Beautiful, Bill.
They made it.
Yeah, just beautiful. I always have a tear in my eye listening to that song. It's it's really beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. So I guess we'll move along. We're talking about some of the inspiration of some of the early conservation heritage that we have. One of the big issues that was really a dynamite issue for launching the environmental movement was the debate over Hetchy Valley in Yosemite National Park. That was a valley that was considered the twin of Yosemite, not as large, not as deep, but beautiful in its own way. Muir spent the latter part of his life fighting to try to protect that valley. So some years later, Bill was asked to see if he could write something up about that movement to restore Hetchy and to say what we could do today to do with that valley, to bring water to the cities, but still bring back the national park as it was before the dam, was a place that Muir and others very much enjoyed, and wildlife abounded. Today, it's drowned by a reservoir, and the lake goes back many miles, make a very steep shoreline. It's hard to get very far along, and there was no boating allowed on the reservoir, so it's kind of a limiting of the public access to part of our national park.
Angry
But
water.
but that battle, in some ways, as we'll see later, was very crucial to um, the issue of environmentalism. It was one of the first campaigns really debating the issue of overdevelopment and trying to protect natural areas. And so these recent books tell about the story and that history of that, and it's still considered something you could refer to today. And in fact, as we'll see later on, David Brower referred back to the Hetchy debate when he was talking about saving some of our other rivers, saying we never want that to happen again. So artists have been envisioning what Hetchy may look like again when it gets restored someday in the future, when we become more enlightened and find some engineering solutions may take care of the water supply. And this is artist Garrett Burke's uh, vision of the restored valley. So let's hear a perspective from Bill about uh, John Muir's perspective and perspective of some of those who would like to still see that valley restored.
Well, this song was it came out of getting to know Ron Good and some of the other folks. Uh, that board of directors for Restore Hetchy, I believe, included David Brower and Harold. Correct? Weren't
Yes,
you?
yes. Ron put together, founded
Oh,
the original organization,
oh,
and there was a group of us at our organizing meeting. David Brower became, I think, on the advisory committee shortly thereafter. But we had a real group of activists, and that group has gone through a lot of efforts over the years and continues to exist, trying to promote that issue. And it's a long-term issue, but environmentalists have never had had short-term battles. You know, the Hetchy battle itself was some 14 years long before that one was lost. The Wilderness Act, which, by the way, is the anniversary today, is the anniversary of the Wilderness Act of 1964. It took 8 years to get that wilderness bill passed through Congress. The California Desert Protection Act took longer than that. So environmentalists have tenacity.
hmm. Yeah. Right. And poor John Muir, he died about a year after this was snuck through Congress. The Raker Act, I think.
Yes.
Ron Good helped spur this song along. It's almost a co-write. We tacked on a bridge at the end. So that was the rallying cry. Here we go. Imagine yourself in Hetchy on a warm sunny day in June, standing waist deep in grasses and flowers, as John Muir often stood, while the great pines sway with scarcely a motion, the water falls like thistledown. The water is woven in patterns and tones that spirits might wear as a gown. To Ulala Falls and Wapama Falls, surging and frozen in time, reverberating, rejoicing and waiting, chilling, haunting, sublime. Imagine yourself in Hetchy, hiking up Kolana Rock, 2,000 feet over the valley, named by the ancient Miwok. Their spirits are here, the glaciers we hear. If only this granite could talk. They do if you listen, and waterfalls glisten. Life is slowed down to a walk. To Ulala Falls and Wapama Falls, replenish the Tuolumne. The high mountain air, the deer and the bear, the mystery of Hetchy. Imagine a second Yosemite, one without all the cars, a treaty twixt humans and nature, restoring and healing the scars. The meadows will bloom, the trees will resume their journeys up to the stars. Life reappears, the dam disappears, and we realize who we are. To Ulala Falls, we'll fall once again to a Tuolumne River set free. And the world will come here and hold this place dear, the miracle of Hetchy. Hooray for Hetchy, Yosemite's twin. We can all help give it freedom again. Hooray for Hetchy, and soon to be seen the grand landscape garden of America's dream. The grand landscape garden. That's Muir.
That was Muir's words. Yes. Very good. Very nice.
And Ron's paragraph. Ron's stanza.
Well, that's good, and then there was a newer version that they took your original song and kind of built upon it, and the current executive director got a little more of a country rock sound to it and added a few lyrics. So the more music we have to celebrate protecting the earth, the better, as far as I'm concerned. That's
an all-star cast. Bill Kirchen. Yeah,
yes.
And a bunch of other A-list around here. They crunched it up.
Yes. Yep. Yep. Well, that's great. So that's kind of the inspiration, I think, for music, folk music in general. So the next song that I asked you to sing is probably one of my favorite songs of all time, and it's kind of a rousing call, and I've had some personal history with that song because originally Bill wrote that song as part of a protest at the Glen Canyon Dam, and he wrote that song, and you see there was kind of a movement going on for a while. He had "More Power to You" bumper stickers. He had T-shirts that said "More Power to You" on them, and that song has been released on 3 of his albums, as well as the John Muir tribute CD released by the John Muir Memorial Association. I heard this song back, in the '80s when Bill first wrote that, and he performed it at Ranch Days in the John Muir National Historic Site, which you see here back then in the '80s. But in 1989, I invited him to come to Visalia, where there was going to be the California Wilderness Conference in 1989, and we were celebrating efforts to protect wilderness for the California desert, for example, and other wilderness issues. And one of the things that we celebrated was the establishment of John Muir Day as a special day of recognition in California. Assemblyman Bill Campbell was the author of that legislation and introduced it and passed it through the state legislature, which asked upon schools and teachers and citizens to recognize John Muir's birthday every April 21st as an inspiration towards protecting the environment and having a healthy environment for everyone. And that was an important message. So Bill performed that song to celebrate at that conference. So let's hear it once again on the miracle of Zoom.
Yeah, all right. The first time I did this, the first rally, I was writing it at the last moment, I was just working on the verses, and I got up to it, and it all blew away. It was a windy day, and everything I had blew away, and all I had was the refrain, and it just had in the first verse. So it was hilarious. It was funny. Fortunately, Lee Stetson was there, and John Muir was there, and we had it all covered for a while. But then I could find the words later on. Long is the legend of the life of John Muir, and many are the dangers he braved. Without his leadership, you can be sure Yosemite would never been saved. A century later, the battle remains. The momentum you're facing is huge. So is the movement inspired by his name. May his courage and his work live in you. Your power to you. May the strength of a redwood be yours. Your power to you. With the grip of a glacier endure. Your power John Muir would have been proud. He traveled alone on 1,000-mile hikes when the weather was warm or would freeze. He loved the Sierra when it filled up with storm, and he was tied atop a swaying tree. He worshipped the beauty of all he could see, even when he was robbed of his sight. When his vision returned, he would go on to be the protector of the range of light. More power to you as you look with the light from within. More power to you as the wilderness becomes your friend. Your power to you. John Muir would have been proud. Scientists and teachers would arrive at the points that his articles and lectures would claim. Even politicians would eventually join with what photographers and artists would frame. When we think of John Muir, it's so easy to see the difference one person can make. The same rivers flowing through you and me, it's living in the steps that we take. Your power to you as you fight to keep that river alive. Your power to you as you help another species survive. Your power to you on the mountains and oceans and trails. Your power to you in the classrooms and courtrooms and jails. Your power to you. May the strength of a redwood be yours. Your power to you. With the grip of a glacier endure. Your power to you. John Muir would have been proud.
Great, thank you, Bill. That's a beautiful, beautiful song. And it's all about following footsteps, saving the rivers, saving the land, uh, making it worthwhile for everyone to enjoy. Um, the next song is by someone who did follow in Muir's footsteps, William O. Douglas. I should say Justice William O. Douglas, who was a Supreme Court justice for many decades, one of the longest living members of the Supreme Court. And he was sort of an interesting fellow because he worked on that court and did a lot of songs, but he also was a real mountaineer and a backpacker and an author. He wrote numerous books, some 8 or 9 books at least, about the mountains, and one of them was a book about John Muir, John Muir, The Mountains. And this was an illustrated children's book, or I should probably say young adult book is what we would call it today, that he wrote about Muir as an inspiration for his adventures and helping to inspire us to protect wild places for future generations to enjoy. That book was republished. This original version was published in like 1961. The Sierra Club Books republished it in 1994 with a different illustrator with color pictures and kind of abridged the text, but it's another book that you can see Stikine there, and they sort of juxtaposed Stikine from Alaska with it looks like more like a Yosemite or Hetchy waterfall than Alaska there, but that's artist license for you. Uh, the Justice Douglas was well known as a mountaineer. There was even some movie about his experiences doing that. He was a longtime Sierra Club member, and I even came across his membership card from 1969 to 1970. Sort of interesting. You could write he could write to him as Justice William O. Douglas, U.S. Supreme Court, Washington D.C., and it would get to him. But the Sierra Club did name one of its awards after William O. Douglas for people who engaged in legal efforts to protect the environment. And he's something of an icon and sometimes a controversial figure. He was a real defender of individual rights and was sometimes controversial in his time, but he also did some inspirational kinds of writing on the side and even in some of his legal opinions, such as his dissent in Sierra Club v. Morton, which was the issue about protecting Mineral King Valley in what's now Sequoia National Park, but at the time was being proposed for a ski resort. And Sierra Club and many other groups opposed that ski resort that would have defiled that beautiful natural valley. And he dissented in that case, saying that trees should have standing. And that issue seemed radical at the time, and it's been radical for years. But I read recently that there are several countries that are adopting that as a legal principle. They've given kind of personhood legal rights to a river in New Zealand, for example. So some of these ideas that seem crazy were not so crazy. You think about the long term. And there's a real connection here with the Yosemite Conservation Heritage Center, which I think everyone here knows was originally called the LeConte Memorial Lodge. The name was changed a few years ago for very good reasons. But in 1955, the Sierra Club mounted an exhibit called This is the American Earth at the lodge in Yosemite Valley. It had photographs by Ansel Adams and some other photographers. It had amazing poetry by Nancy Newhall, whose writing should be more well known. It's beautiful writing. This exhibit went on for 5 years in the building, and since then it's returned a few times at other places. Yosemite Museum had a re-release of it back in the 90s, I believe it was. But about 5 years after that, 1960, this book was published, This is the American Earth. And you'll see that Supreme Court Justice William O. Douglas was rather taken by this book. He said it's one of the great statements in the history of conservation. And this book is a black and white book, unlike the later exhibit format books, but this was the first of the Sierra Club exhibit format books, which were designed to highlight and showcase natural areas that needed to be protected. And this one started with not a specific place like most of the others or specific geographic area, but with the entire Earth, well, the American Earth especially, as the focus. But you'll find in this book pictures from actually other countries, Egypt and India and other places as well. But talking about how unique we are in America to have some places that are more untouched than most of the world has. But Justice Douglas wrote forward for this book. It was published on the back cover of the paperback edition with his text celebrating this, and that's pretty high praise to call this book one of the great statements in the history of conservation. I recently reread it, and it still is a very important book, but unfortunately it's been forgotten by a lot of people, and hopefully it'll be republished sometime soon, so a new generation can learn about it, because its message is really still relevant to us today. So Justice Douglas wrote a lot of books about the mountains, about mountaineering. Here he is at a book signing of his book of Men and Mountains, and he still had time to write Supreme Court opinions on the side. So this was my longest presentation for any of our songs, so I'll just turn it over to Bill.
Well, I could talk a lot longer about Douglas. That was what a story. He has so many of them. I got enamored of him early on in the playing with the Sierra Club group. He had a book. He has a book called Farewell to Texas, which he covers the whole state pretty well. And he had East Texas. He named some of the devastation going on in East Texas and the beautiful mixed forests over there that are being destroyed and brought down. The big fight we had there going on with a guy named Ned Fritz was sort of the John Muir of East Texas. He was our local hero that way. But through that book, Farewell to Texas, he talked about the Guadalupe Mountains, which he and some others were very fond of and were instrumental in preserving or turning into a park. And there was a lawyer in town named Byron Lockhart that I went to visit and got an audience with, and he got me an audience with Justice Douglas at the Supreme Court chambers. This was right after he had his stroke, about 6 months or so after his stroke. He still had an office. He wasn't on the court. And but he was in his office, and I got to go visit him, and I played a song called "There's This Hill" for him, and had a really interesting time with him, which we can save for another time. But I mostly the moment I told him that I had written a stanza of that one song, but when following reading something he wrote about Mount Adams, and he had his father's funeral. He looked up at Mount Adams. He was about 10 years old. And he looked up at Mount Adams and transferred his fatherly connection to this mountain at that age. And I said there was something in all that helped me finish the song. And at that point, he looked past me at a chair beyond me and said, "There's Adams." Sort of like that mountain back there. And I looked back there, and there was a picture of Mount Adams. And oh, good timing. Climbing high above Yakima to overcome being frail. Early lessons in nature's laws were waiting out on the trail. From Washington State to Washington, D.C., he shaped the laws of the land. For 36 years on the Supreme Court, with his mind, his heart, and his hands. William O. Douglas, man of the wilderness, Jefferson's spirit and the Bill of Rights, friend of the Indian, hobo and president, defender of nature and the poor people's fight. His father was a man of the holy book. To the small town churches he'd ride. With the turn of the century strength he spoke, but he was far too young when he died. And his mother was a widow at a tender age, with a family of four to provide. Together they struggled through the hardest of times, and he grew like a mountain inside. William O. Douglas, man of the wilderness, Jefferson's spirit and the Bill of Rights, friend of the Indian, hobo and president, defender of nature and the poor people's fight. He stood for a public dominion in the face of oppressive opinion. And like Lewis and Clark, Audubon and Muir, he followed the visions within him. A master of the mountains of mystery, he could slap the backside of a grizzly and inspire the pals of the C&O Canal, rewrite the verdicts of history. William O. Douglas, man of the wilderness, Jefferson's spirit and the Bill of Rights, friend of the Indian, hobo and president, defender of nature and the poor people's fight. Ruth Bader Gibson is right here. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is right back here watching us. Bringing Ruth in.
All
How you
right.
doing? Can you see her back there? She's
Good. Well, I heard a lot about William O. Douglas from Polly Dyer when I lived in Washington State, and Polly Dyer was one of the people who attended the special hike that Douglas had along the Olympic Peninsula
yes,
to try to
right.
protect the rainforest and the coastline of Olympic National Park, and that was an amazing thing. He did those kinds of leadership sorts of things. It was, instead of marching in the streets, they were hiking in the wilderness to make a point that this land should be protected. And the other thing he did was a hike. I don't know, not sure how far it was, 30 miles or something along the C&O Canal
Yeah,
to
high profile.
to protect that area. So,
Well, they started it at the end, the Cumberland River, and walked into D.C., and by the time he got there, it was a large throng with him. It's great.
good. Well, it shows this thing about walking in the footsteps. We walk in the footsteps of the people who came before, who've inspired us. And it doesn't mean we're going to stay mired in the past. We're going to move forward with some of the things that we need to do to make a better future. But we start from that common ground, and then we move forward to make things better for everybody. So,
Douglas story, he kind of guy. He is a disgusting overachiever. He was on a horseback pack trip, and his horse fell down the cliff and rolled over him. He broke every rib. He's over 65 years old. He broke every rib. He healed the ribs, and when the doctor said, "Okay, I think you're healed," he says, "Okay, I want to go check it out and hike the Appalachian Trail to check it out." Like, stop it! Things like that. Yeah, he tutored his way through. He tutored grad students at Columbia University when he first got there while hopping the train. That's how he got through college, tutoring people older than him.
well, and as you know, Bill, I'm a retired lawyer, and I remember reading a lot of Justice Douglas's legal opinions in law school.
Oh, I guess so. Yeah.
And then I remember the stories that other justices would say, "I'm struggling over this issue about censorship, whether we should censor this book or not." And they said, they don't have time to do anything except work on their cases. And how do you have time to work on these books and stuff? We said he had a very precise in his mind legal philosophy, which was people came first. So if there was a corporation or a business or a government that was trying to impose something against the people, he just had their simple litmus test: people or government. People win. So he write the opinions quickly, and he said he had lots of free time because he saw things so clearly through his special lens. And of course, since then, we've had Supreme Court justices who've had the same kind of idea of a special lens, like Justice Scalia, who believes that we shouldn't interpret the Constitution except as the founding fathers would have interpreted it back then, and not have it come forward and be a living, breathing document. So there's two conflicting viewpoints of legal principles of which way you want to follow, and we're still dealing with those issues for decades on the Supreme Court.
And it wasn't like he was unaware of the financial world. He came to the court from the Securities Exchange Commission,
Right.
and which Roosevelt had pointed him to, and then the court, and he came that close to being Harry Truman, being the
Right.
vice president.
Right. Yeah, he's considered a vice presidential nominee. Yeah.
But
pretty amazing character and kind of unusual in his personal life. And
His autobiographies, is the really thick ones, the two tomes are. One is called Go East. The first one's Go East, Young Man, and you'd think that would be the most exciting because it has most of the nature and the wilderness and the youth, all of the youth in there, and he goes. And then the second volume is the court years. I thought this is going to be, oh, this is going to be too dry, but it was fascinating too.
mhm. A lot of controversies that he was involved in. But he was still one of those who walking in the footsteps. So that's got to do with our next song,
Hey,
maybe kayaking on the footsteps, right?
yeah,
Because what I think the reason I thought of this song next to ask you to play, Bill, was because to my mind, we can think of iconic people like Supreme Court justice, and there's great people who are leaders. But what this song talks about is how all of us can be friends of the river, friends of the forest, friends of the mountains, and friends of disadvantaged people everywhere. So that's this song, and I love this song. It's the one of the featured titles of one of your albums. So please go ahead and do this one
right.
for us.
Okie dokie. Great. Yeah, and with a nod to the California group Friends of the River. That was about the time I was spending a lot of time in California and on the rivers there. Had a lot of great guides. All right. Well, come on, let's be a friend of the river, a twisting, turning old life giver. Every river needs a friend of the river. Grab your paddle and your life jacket, hit the current and hit the rapids. Any friend of the river is a friend of mine. We're canoers and we're kayakers, wild and woolly white water rafters, tree huggers and nature loving. They cook in stacks of old Dutch ovens. Any friend of the river is a friend of mine. In the desert and in the forest, in the canyon outstretched before us, any friend of the river is a friend of mine. I've got friends who live by the river. When they go boating, they make it better. They pick up litter and write good letters, do whatever to save their river. Any friend of the river is a friend of mine. Come on, let's be a friend of the river, a twist and turn, an old life giver. Every river needs a friend of the river. Every river needs a friend of the river. Any friend of the river is a friend of mine.
That's great, Bill. Thank you. I always hear that song and I think it's not only those rivers you kayak on, it's kind of the river of life, right?
Can't step into the same river of life twice.
Yep, we only have one life to live, so let's make the most of it. Good.
Yeah. One of the friends in that song is be heading to Oregon soon. He's just had shoulder surgery, but he knows just what stretches he can handle
Mm,
out there.
great. Well, speaking of rivers, there's a fellow who some of us have heard about named Dave Brower, who was instrumental in fighting to save some rivers. And in your song that you're going to sing about that, knocking down dams, you also mentioned Ansel Adams, which I'd be remiss to not mention here because
Hmm.
Ansel Adams was the curator of the LeConte Memorial Lodge in 1919
Oh,
for I
that's
think two
right.
seasons.
Oh,
And so he was very involved in early Sierra Club history in general, being on the board of directors for many decades and many issues, and involved in a lot of controversial issues at the time. but he has this connection to the building that we're having a virtual concert in today instead of being up in Yosemite at that LeConte Memorial Lodge, now named the Yosemite Conservation Heritage Center. We're just kind of doing it virtually, but Ansel Adams was there. I also remember being in that building back in the 90s and Dave Brower coming and speaking also. So we've had some of these icons of history have been fairly recent. So um, David Brower, of course, is known as the man who built the Sierra Club, kind of using Hetchy as a rallying cry to protect other wilderness and wild places. He is known for his efforts to protect the Grand Canyon when the Bureau of Reclamation wanted to build not one but two dams in the Grand Canyon that would have dammed up the Colorado River. He campaigned on that, and Sierra Club lost its IRS standing, so they created a separate organization, the Sierra Club Foundation, to still get tax deductible donations, which they still exist side by side today. But one of the efforts that he had was Glen Canyon, and as part of protecting that Grand Canyon, he had to make a deal, a compromise, which allowed for this dam, the Glen Canyon Dam, to be constructed, which flooded the Glen Canyon, which at that time was not very well known by very many people. And afterwards, David Brower said, "This was the biggest mistake of my life. I wish I'd known it better." And he put together this book, a Sierra Club book, one of those exhibit format books, photographs by Elliot Porter. But Dave Brower put this book together called The Place No One Knew, about the Glen Canyon. And this was basically an eulogy to that canyon as it was being inundated with water from the Glen Canyon Dam at that time. So here's the song, Knockin' Down Dams, David Brower.
So in the early 80s, I was asked to present it uh, with Brower at Stanford. He had a course there in which he had a co-presenter for each section, and I was honored to be included in that. It would be 2 days. He takes the first hour, and I take the second half. And the second day of this, we all showed up, and he came in, and he said, surprised everybody. He says, my prepared lecture has been totally scrapped because we just found out Ansel Adams died. It's the day Ansel Adams died, or the day after. And so his whole program was speaking about Ansel Adams and how they met. And how they met, it's just another one of those amazing stories, and it's how the song starts. High on a trail in Yosemite Park, two hikers were approaching, and as they passed, they exchanged a glance, but not a word was spoken. One was hiking down, one was headed up, each carried a heavy camera. Aren't you David Brower? Aren't you Ansel Adams? Now we're hiking down trails, hiking down trails, hiking down trails for you. Who knows who you'll meet when you follow your feet, hiking down trails for you. A mountain man, a mountaineer who lived a life from the highest ridge, who remembers the day San Francisco Bay was spoiled by the Golden Gate Bridge. A family man who gave a damn when dams were building up, and drank a dram of Tanqueray in his Sierra cup. Now we're knocking down dams, knocking down dams, knocking down dams for you. And we do it for the arch druid, knocking down dams for you. The world turns, the world burns, Rome to a crisp. He was told too many times, he took too many risks. Sierra Club making waves, here comes the IRS. Friends of the earth, rebirth, and rule number 6. Now we're knocking down rules, knocking down rules, knocking down rules for you. And keep on smiling while your Earth Island is knocking down rules for you. Though he would waffle on Sunday mornings, the compromises were few. The real power of Dave Brower are in the places he saved for you. Dinosaur, Grand Canyon, a world of national parks, Cascades, Point Reyes, the ancient voice of young hearts. Let the mountains talk, let the rivers run, let the oceans live again. Let the trees breathe, let the centuries come to terms with man. And in the meantime, as you climb, keep on looking up. Put some Tanqueray in your Sierra cup as you pull the plugs. And we're knocking down dams, knocking down dams, knocking down dams for you. And we do it for the arch druid, knocking down dams for you. Dave Brower.
Dave Brower, the arch druid,
Arch druid.
as Ken Brower wrote in his book about the arch druid, juxtaposing him against Floyd Dominy, the chairman of the Bureau of Reclamation, and how the two would debate those issues. So it's very, very fun book, a very interesting book to read. That's great. And then I liked your little you stuck it on a little what do you call them, an Easter egg. Anyone hear about having waffle on Sundays?
Ah,
Because
yeah.
Dave Brower used to say, well, maybe I should just quit all this and open up a waffle shop because he loved waffles. Thank goodness he didn't. He kept working on the battles to protect the environment.
Well, those waffle socials on Sunday where I only went to a couple of them, but they were definitely the place to be Sunday, late Sunday morning
Great.
in Berkeley.
Well, gosh, the time is going fast. We only have one more song. And I did want to mention that we will have, question and answer period afterwards. So if anyone has a question, I see a couple of people have already used the little hand raise thing. But if you type in the Q&A, there's a Q&A button down at the bottom of your Zoom. And a few people have found it already. So go ahead and type your questions in there for Bill or for me, and we'll discuss them, or try not to go too long because we try to do these programs in a little over an hour, but we didn't even start an hour ago, I think. So we're right on time. So type your questions in, and we're going to hear, I guess I would call this Bill's greatest hit, because this song has been performed through through nature centers and schools all over the country. Many people perform it. Some people have not credited him as the author, but he was the guy. And this has been his signature song for a long time as an environmental troubadour. I love the album cover that they had on this T-shirt. So this song I know is still being performed all the time. I was up at the outdoor science and conservation camp that we have here in Tulare County, and I asked them, "Do you still sing Have to Have a Habitat?" It's, "Oh yeah, we sing that every week when the kids come." So you're very well known in some circles, and a big inspiration for a lot of the kids out there because we all have to have a habitat, right?
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Harold. That's very sweet. Here we go. Your hands on the radio. Oh, here we Habitat. Have to have a habitat. Habitat. Have to have a habitat. Habitat. Have to have a habitat. You have to have habitat to carry on. The ocean is habitat, very special habitat, where the deepest water's at, where the biggest mammals at, where our future food is at, keeps the atmosphere intact. The ocean is habitat, and we depend on habitat, habitat. Have to have a habitat, habitat. Have to have a habitat, habitat. Have to have a habitat, you have to have a habitat to carry on. The forest is a habitat, very special habitat, where the tallest trees are at, where a bear could scratch her back, keeps the ground from rolling back, renews the oxygen. In fact, the forest is habitat, and we depend on habitat. Have to have habitat, habitat. Have to have a habitat, habitat.
Habitat.
Have to have habitat, you have to have habitat to carry on. The river is a habitat, very special habitat, where the freshest water's at. People fishing muskrat, but when people dump their trash, rivers take the biggest rap. The river is habitat that we depend on. People are different than foxes and rabbits, affect the whole world with our bad habits. Better to love it while we still have it, or rat-a-tat-tat, our habitat's gone. Habitat, have to have habitat, habitat. Have to have a habitat, habitat. Have to have a habitat, you have to have a habitat to carry on. You have to have a habitat to carry on. You have to have the Yosemite Conservation Heritage Center to carry on.
All right. Wonderful, wonderful, Bill. Thank you so much. You make me feel like a kid again.
All
You're
right.
just, you know, I'm 7 years old and just loving it. So thank you so much. This fabulous. Okay, I gotta go get my cat to open the door.
What? But
Oh,
Harold's leaving.
I'm leaving because my cat takes priority. The cat was scratching at the door and
Got
couldn't
it.
open the door, and I don't
Yeah.
know why she couldn't, but
Well, I was going to start running the controls. No.
good. Well, like I said, if you have any questions, put them in the
Habitat.
Q&A. I see a few questions coming, and if you stick around a little bit, I'll give a preview of what's we have on our website. We've had three of these programs before, four programs. Last week's was not able to be recorded, but we have three others that are on our website now. So check out, you'll just Google Yosemite Conservation Heritage Center, find our website, and you'll find three previous programs that are part of this virtual summer series that are all worthwhile watching and in similar format to these. So before I mention those again, I'll just look at our Q&A and see what we have. I see from Ron just a comment saying awesome. I can hear Ron saying awesome. Thank you. Uh,
Rod and I used to play Muir Woods. He'd bring his fiddle in to the
that's right.
Candelaria,
He's
the
quite a fiddle player. Yeah.
solstice, the winter solstice, and Muir
Yes.
Woods, candles and fiddle.
Well, thank you, Ron, for participating in this. That's really great, and I can just hear you the way you're kind of like John Denver, who always said awesome. So and far out. But anyway, Lee Turkelson says bravo, bravo, bravo. Thank you. And he has a question. Are you still writing songs, Bill? And what is your latest?
Oh, well, yeah, sure. Sure, I'll say, oh, when his tax returns come in. Oh, when his tax returns come in. Oh, we want to see those numbers. That's sort of a co-write.
Very clever.
Yeah, we're still writing. We're still writing some songs, and I'm working around in Austin at Save Barton Creek Association. Virginia's on the board for that, and we have lots going on. We're trying to go virtual, make videos and
Your
music
song
for them.
Barton Springs Eternal is
Yeah.
beautiful. You know, you don't have a recording on an album, but if you go to YouTube and type in Barton Springs Eternal, that's a beautiful song. And I love the one that group did a video with it
Mhm.
showing the need to protect the Rio Grande River and
Ah,
its
yes.
environment and its habitat with your music singing with that. So, you know, that's one of the songs that you have that's really still inspirational, common issues for people who live in Austin, but it's symbolic for people who want to protect, you know, watersheds and water everywhere.
Yeah, the valley was doing really well protecting that wildlife corridor until the wall came along.
Mm,
It was hard enough before then. They were
yeah.
successful in buying up that property, and now it's under threat.
Hmm.
Anyway, yes, this is an example of a song more on the border, closer to in Texas. Yeah.
Um, let's see. Donna just comments, I've enjoyed the program. Thank you so much. Valerie, hi Valerie, cheering for you, Bill. Habitat song we love you and love from Daniel and Valerie. So it's great to see you guys.
Daniel and Valerie, all right, the
Yeah,
producers of this album, right?
that's right. Show everybody the album.
Yeah.
Hold it up there, Bill. Yeah, the John Muir tribute CD, which was made back in I don't even know what the year was,
Around
mid 90s.
2000.
2000 was it year 2000 came out, and I
Uh-huh.
understand it's still available at the John Muir National Historic site. It's getting fewer and fewer available, but it's a beautiful album with lots of iconic songs about the environment and nature and John Muir and some good old songs for
I
those.
hope Daniel's still playing.
So I think he's still playing, and he's been doing some volunteer work. I understand in Wyoming, and he's been in California recently. He and Val, so they're having a good time, enjoying life, trying to. So yeah, they were very important in getting that. He did the interviews for people and a lot of the behind the scenes work for the
Yeah.
performers on that CD. Um,
Mary
so
Halsey? Mary Halsey? She's there?
I'm not sure she's still around. But Ron just says, I enjoyed those good old days at Muir Woods in Yosemite. He's just remembering times he spent together. And yeah, Valerie comments, Dan McElhenney from the Muir Tribute CD. So it's good to see you guys. So let's see. I think there's a couple more questions. 1999, she says, is when that CD came out. Still being available though. Um, and yes, he was a docent at the Muir Ranch in Grand Teton National Park, which celebrates the lives of Olis and Marty Muir. Um, and I know there's some songs about Marty Muir as a woman conservationist who
Mm.
was really important to the wilderness preservation movement for many years. So, We should celebrate the women that in our history of Sierra Club and environmental history too. They've been crucial to a lot of these efforts, and
I,
John
I
Muir
have
worked
I
with
have
them
some
at the
songs for
beginning.
that.
Yeah,
Hazel Wolf in Seattle.
Hazel Wolf
Yeah.
lived 100 years old, and
Yeah.
I knew her well when I lived in Seattle. Beautiful lady. She was just amazing.
We've got a
So,
couple in Austin that are that inspirational, including Virginia's mother's 104 and a
mm,
half, and just
wow.
COVID.
And still doing stuff. So, oh, that's great.
It really is.
So, let's see here. I think Virginia says inspiring presentation and
Ah,
performance. Thank you. I'm looking for questions.
he's my manager.
Bill, maybe your image will get on Mr. Muir more someday. And yeah, Valerie's just commenting that Ollis and Marty Murie were instrumental in the Wilderness Act, which was passed in 1964 on this day, September
Oh,
3rd. So we're celebrating that day. So I think where time is going, and I see a few people kind of getting ready to take off. So I'm
well,
just
thanks
gonna,
everyone for being here.
I just want to share briefly the some of the previous programs. The first one we had was back on August 6th, where Mike Wirtz from the University of Pacific told us all about his new book, John Muir's Grand Yosemite, which has the drawings and sketches that Muir did in Yosemite National Park, and he juxtaposed what those are with how to find that same location today, or close to it, as close as possible. So once we start being able to go to Yosemite again, well, I guess you can now, but if you make a reservation. But a recording of that program is now available. Um, the other one was Hidden Wonders of Yosemite's Night Sky, which is a little
Oh,
bit misleading because my wife Janet did this as a solar system ambassador, and it's actually about views of the solar system and other galaxies that you would see from big telescopes like the Hubble Space Telescope, and not necessarily just from Yosemite. It could be anywhere in North America, at least during the month of August. So check that program out. It's amazing photography from NASA that you'll enjoy in that. And then very interesting book told to us by Jonas Kulikauskas,
easy for you to
who
say.
wrote a book called Yosemite People, and it basically was black and white anti Ansel Adams. Kind of opposite, not anti, but opposite Ansel Adams. Instead of Ansel Adams was known for always taking photographs with never any people in them. Well, this book does just the opposite. All the pictures have people in them, and in Yosemite, and there's some very interesting scenes, very touching scenes. Couples kissing with on an overlook, and people being interviewed or interrogated by national park rangers. Uh, there's some of the people who work there, the stables, and so on behind the scenes. Very interesting. So I recommend that to folks. So we couldn't have been in this building this year, unfortunately, but please check out our website. There's more information about the Yosemite Conservation Heritage Center back there that you'll find, and the programs are over for this year. So we've had a kind of a good run with the virtual summer series, and the summer's about over. So this is the last of the programs. We were hoping to have one more, but that one fell through. So uh, please enjoy yourselves and be safe out there, and visit our website. And Bill, just thank you so much for performing with us tonight. It's brought back a lot of really good memories for some of us who are familiar with your songs, and for those who are not, I hope you'll check it out. Some very different and beautiful songs that you've written.
It's an honor to present in this venue. Thank you so much for having it.
All righty, you're welcome. Goodbye, everyone. Take care.